Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be reacting to why this manga about failing might save you. Now, I actually have not read this manga, so this is going to be quite a surprise for me, but I am quite curious as to what the content creator is going to be talking about in regards to this manga, which is why I want to check it out. Now, I might read the manga right after I watch this, who knows? I have a lot of webtoons I have to get through though, but you know, there's always time for some of those golden nuggets once in a while as I read the trash webtoons that I like to read. But in any case, if you do enjoy the video, then be sure to support the original video. And of course, if you enjoy my reaction to it after, then be sure to give it a like, comment below, subscribe, and share. And I did get permission from the content creator to react to this, so thank you very much for that. Now let's get started.
So, before this video even begins, I'm not sure what this video is going to be about. Is this going to be a video essay, a breakdown of a series and its components? I couldn't tell you. All I know is that at the time that I'm writing this, July 18th, 2025, I am feeling incredibly low. So much so that I kind of want to throw away all the baggage and just float by. Why do I feel like this? Well, where to even begin? There's a wide variety of reasons that I don't think are worth getting into for the sake of not ruining my CTR on this video, but instead I have a question for you guys. When you're feeling upset or maybe sad, do you have a certain author that you return to? Maybe to feel a sense of acceptance or to reground you? Well, I do. Whenever I feel like this, I often return to one of my favorite mangaka, Nagata Kabi, who I am strangely similar to. And I find myself rereading everything. My lesbian experience with loneliness, my twisted eating disorder, my alcoholic escape from reality, my wandering warrior existence, you name it. But one that always ends up captivating me and allows me to find it in myself to continue through everything for even one more day is My Pancreas Broke, But My Life Got Better. In this entry, Nagata Kabi explores some very deep feelings, mostly rooted in her on and off addiction to alcohol and its consequences. In today's video, I'm going to be exploring this piece while also explaining to you guys what this manga means to me. If you enjoy this video, or if you relate to either me or this story, please be sure to subscribe. Leaving a like would also help a lot. It gives me the confidence to create more videos like this in the future. But with
Make sure to
said,
do that.
let's begin. In the first chapter, or rather the prologue before the manga even begins, Nagata Kabi is informed that she has a condition called pancreatitis, which is the inflammation of the pancreas, which has many causes, but is most commonly seen from high alcohol use, something that Nagata Kabi had been struggling with. In order to treat Nagata Kabi's condition, she'd have to be admitted into a hospital for an extended amount of time. But the anxiety from being at the hospital and having to inform her parents about her condition at such a crucial time during her life was too much. So when the opportunity was presented, she ran away. This is something that you see a lot of in Nagata Kabi's works, that is not only very human, but what I feel is very reflective of myself. When things don't work out for me, after so long, all I think about is running away, quitting, leaving all of it behind. But when I actually do that and I'm 2 to 3 days behind on videos and have to cram it all into one night, I'm left thinking, what am I even doing? Nagata Kabi is not a character. She is a person, and like most of, if not all of us, she has her own set of real-life problems and circumstances. Nagata Kabi fears having to speak up. Nagata Kabi fears having to take accountability for her actions. That doesn't make her weak, nor does that make her a bad person. It humanizes Nagata Kabi in a way that a lot of authors lack. And I think that
It's funny. I mean, it's not funny, obviously, the situation, but it's funny how the character or Nagata Kabi is, or let me actually look at they actually wrote down what her actual name is. Let me remove this. Nagata Kabi, 34, manga artist. Drank about something something, probably. But it's interesting how imperfect she looks in comparison to the others around her. And it's definitely reflected in her I suppose, low self-esteem and anxiety. And you can tell how anxious she looks just by looking at her character. She doesn't look as clean as other characters that you see. And it gets even worse, especially with the lines and everything, imperfect lines. In this part where it was the morning after her grandmother's funeral. So clearly she feels a lot of guilt in regards to that. And you can definitely see it in her drawing right here in this frame where there's like so many lines. And usually such things would use like very perfect lines to show the effects. But here it's like clearly imperfect. And you can definitely tell the amount of pressure and anxiety and so much intense emotions inside of her, complexity inside of her just from those lines and the imperfection in the drawing of this Nagata-san or Nagata Kabi-san. I don't know if I believe this is this about, I need to double check, but I think this whole, I guess, manga, I don't know if it's like a 5 koma or like some kind of short one shot or something. I assume it is, but it's interesting that it's about her. I assume it's about herself, which makes it more relatable. But the fact that she's doing it for herself, about herself, makes me want to cry for her.
Kabi's works that is not only
The amount of
very
shame you
human,
feel,
but what
the
I feel is
failure.
very reflective of myself. When things don't work out for me, after so long, all I think about is running away, quitting, leaving all of it behind. But when I actually do that and I'm 2 to 3 days behind on videos and have to cram it all into one night, I'm left thinking, what am I even doing? Nagata Kabi is not a character. She is a person, and like most of, if not all of us, she has her own set of real-life problems and circumstances. Nagata Kabi fears having to speak up. Nagata Kabi fears having to take accountability for her actions. That doesn't make her weak, nor does that make her a bad person. It humanizes Nagata Kabi in a way that a lot of authors lack. And I think that it's for this reason I can feel something when I'm reading something by Nagata Kabi. After running away from the hospital...
Okay, so that does confirm that it's by her herself, and it's about her experiences. I felt like that was the case, but I had to like double check. Since I haven't read anything by her, but clearly even here you can see the difference between herself, like how she portrays herself, and other characters. Like the other characters are a lot more clean, like it's more emphasized compared to the lack of care in her own character, interestingly.
But still calling to leave a message, she is allowed to be an outpatient, but it is instructed that she cannot drink a single drop of alcohol. And while looking up at the ceiling, lost in thought, we're taking a step back into Nagata Kabi's mind, before the alcohol became a prominent piece of her life. There was a time where Nagata Kabi was completely alcohol-free. She didn't drink and she lived a fairly
Do you see the difference? Okay, so let me go back a little. It's a lot cleaner here when she's portraying herself when she didn't drink compared to this moment here. Like, it's less clean in comparison. Like, it just feels like you're looking at a completely different character, if that makes sense.
Calling to leave a message, she is allowed to be an outpatient, but it is
And even up there, if you look
a
up,
single drop of alcohol. And while looking up at the ceiling, lost in thought, we're taking a step back into
it's very
Nagata
simple,
Kabi's
like she's about to
mind
fade away.
before the alcohol became a prominent piece of her life. There was a time where Nagata Kabi was completely alcohol-free. She didn't drink and
I know it's kind of, I mean, she still looks like a mess here too, but like, she has a lot more, it's cleaned up a bit more, and there's slightly thicker lines compared to what we saw in the earlier.
she lived a fairly modest life. But
I don't know if this is the case in every single one of her pieces, but even here you can see the I could draw part, that part, it's a lot cleaner compared to like the previous versions of her that we saw in the current timeline, I guess we could call it that.
after her story, My Lesbian Experience with Loneliness, caught the world by storm, the status that came with it allowed her to live a little differently. Since she now acknowledged herself as an adult that had left some form of impact on the world and was getting attention, she allowed herself to drink. which was something that she hadn't permitted herself to do before. And when she drank,
Yes.
she felt all the guilt in her life slip away. The guilt of making her mother cry with her most popular piece that went into detail about her pain and her internal struggles. The guilt of having to be productive as a now fairly established mangaka. This would all eventually spiral into a loop where drinking would become Nagata's freedom from everything. Again, it's kind of sickening how much I see myself in this piece. While I don't engage in alcohol as a means of freeing myself from the ties I have, I do engage in other things as a form of escapism. I fall into mindsets where I don't want to do certain things.
That's true, especially even if you're not like a creator of some sort, like content creator, artist, musician. There are times when you just don't want to deal with the pressure anymore. And so you do something more drastic, like escapism into games or other types of addiction. And it can be really hard to get out of that escapism mindset too, because you're afraid to face the negative consequences or feelings that you don't really want to stress over. But it's always going to be there until you do. But it's a very difficult situation because for many, it's like dealing with the unknown. And for many people, the unknown is something terrifying. And so you overthink, and that leads to anxiety, and that leads to negative behavior that you might not have otherwise have chosen to have in the past. There is just, it's really hard to get out of the victim mentality and even other negative patterns of thinking if you're so used to thinking in that way and you continue to think in that way. And trying to change that is extremely hard. So most people just go into escapism, like consuming a large amount of games or casinos or alcohol or things like that.
I don't want to upload anymore. I don't like any of my videos. I don't want to keep trying. And that eventually spirals until it reaches a point where it becomes a loop. After one upload fails, I take some days off. After another upload fails, I take even more days off. A while ago, it reached a point where I hadn't even uploaded for about a month or longer. It just goes to show that when you are
I can feel for you. Except for me, I still push myself because I just feel guilty if I don't upload because I have you guys who are watching my videos. So I keep going. And if it gets too much and I get ill again, then I usually switch things up for myself and for my content to keep going. But I totally understand the pain in some ways. It's just, it feels like all the efforts you put into it. Now I don't really deal with it as much anymore, but I do understand like how it feels to put so much effort in, but the platform doesn't send it out, or there's some new change happening, so you have to like do something else. And it's just very difficult to make yourself remain positive when you have the result in front of you, which feels like failure. Even though in the long run, when you look back, it's actually not that much of a failure compared to what you think at the present. So I usually try to remind myself of that, but sometimes it can be really difficult. And I'm sure that's also the case for you guys too. It doesn't have to do with creations or creating things or releasing things. It could be even for your own work. Like you might have thought your work was a failure, that it wasn't perfect enough, if you're a perfectionist as an example. But when you look back on it, it's actually not that bad. You did pretty good. But that perspective takes such a long time to reach sometimes that you end up feeling ashamed of yourself and the efforts that you put into, even though you put in a lot of effort. And so because of that, you end up getting so stressed out and overwhelmed to the point that you just quit. I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to.
are down, when you are overcome by everything in your life and just want something, anything to distract you, something to avert your eyes from the reality of the world, even the most minor of things can become a dangerous cycle, whether that's alcohol, whether that's escapism, whether that's procrastination, whatever it is. Nagata Kabi's alcohol addiction gradually got worse until it reached.
Do you see? She looks a lot worse than, I mean, the way that she drew herself is a lot, like, especially starting with the eyes, it's more messy compared to like the first where she didn't drink anything at all before at the time. It's interesting to see the progression on how worse she got through the use of her drawings.
To the point where she had to be admitted into a hospital once again. But the things in the real world that she could no longer run away from, such as communication, people, all of it scared her, resulting in her running away once more and being switched to a women's only hospital. This hospital was much more accepting of the patient's request, which actually allowed for some good healing time for Nagata Kabi. But after leaving the hospital and getting her hands on some more alcohol, the loop would once again repeat. But Nagata Kabi wouldn't be as lucky as her other times. This time, she'd not only develop fatty liver, also known as alcoholic fatty liver disease, but would also develop pancreatitis, both of these conditions being the product of her heavy and prolonged drinking.
I mean, I know this isn't about health, but seriously, you guys, please prioritize your health. Nothing is more important than health. It's hard to get back to a healthy condition if you're not trying to be healthy. Not that I'm saying that you should like quit everything, but like do everything in moderation, please. As someone who has been sick as a child and even sometimes as an adult too, and dealing with a chronic illness, it's really hard to get back to a healthy state. Please do not neglect it. Even if you're young, yeah, it might seem like everything's okay, but eventually it's gonna hit you like a truck and you're gonna really regret it.
These two conditions combined would not only restrict what Nagata Kabi could consume, but also would result in her being connected to an IV drip 24/7, which I can imagine being quite uncomfortable. But despite everything, Nagata Kabi would make a lucky recovery about 20 days in and be allowed to return home. But of course, she was ordered to stay away from drinking, along with restrictions being put on some foods that she can and cannot consume. In the start, Nagata Kabi would heed this warning, finding alternatives for alcohol, along with fried foods that she'd been told to stay away from. But about a month in, she had reached her breaking point. The guilt that she had been formerly chasing away through the use of alcohol hit her all at once, and the only way that she knew how to accept it was through alcohol. Nagata Kabi was, once again, back to drinking an unhealthy amount of alcohol. But surprisingly, nothing happened regarding the pancreatitis. But on her own accord, she decided to get specialized treatment for her addiction. At the addiction clinic, Nagata Kabi went.
It would have been really bad if she had continued and then made her health even worse. So she's amazing for actually being the type to actually see that there's a problem and then getting help for it. Because I think a lot of people are worried that they wouldn't be able to cope if they didn't have it, and so they choose to not get it treated. But for those that do, you guys are really amazing. A lot of respect to you. Not that I don't respect the people who are addicted to alcohol and whatnot and other things, but it's always amazing to see people who do take the initiative to fix the issues that they clearly do have. In this case for her, it's her addiction to alcohol.
It was suggested for her to take place in a group meeting with people who had already conquered their alcohol addictions, but it would be an hour wait until that meeting actually began. That hour's wait would gradually turn into hell for Nagata. She couldn't stand the voices clouding her ears. She couldn't stand being surrounded by all these people with their own motives and circumstances and stories and ideas. It was stressful. So Nagata Kabi chooses the easy way out once more and runs away. This
that's
part
a shame, but it can't be helped.
Makes me feel as though I can really.
I mean, I'm kind of slightly sad that she left, but I can understand too, because sometimes sensory overstimulation can be a bit too much. When she said that, she was getting overstimulated by the noise, it made me think, oh, I wish I could give her noise cancellation earbuds or something. Maybe that would have helped a bit more. And I do wonder if she had something like that, would she have been able to stay? Because I totally get her. The overstimulation with noise and lights and people can be very tough, especially for those who have a condition that gives you like migraines or other health issues. It can be so painful. For her, it's obviously anxiety and whatnot, or maybe other conditions too. But I just can't stand it whenever there's so many people and so many lights and so much noise. I especially hate when it's so noisy. Ugh, what about you? Can you handle all of that? Overstimulation of your sensories, I guess? Sensory or senses, I suppose?
They relate to Nagata Kabi. I've been pretty transparent with my issues I had in school on this channel. I didn't really fit into the school environment. I was on the more quiet side. I preferred not to talk to people. That was just how I felt. That's just how I am as a person. But I will never forget the sound of all the voices blending together, whether that was in the classrooms or the cafeteria, talking about things that I could care less about, things that in the grand scheme of things held no real weight. All of it stressed me out so bad. That stuff made me nervous. I couldn't stand the voices of people blending together. When you are forced to be in an environment like that, the only thing you want to do is escape and go back home where it's nice and quiet and comfortable, which we see Nagata Kabi do. When she returned home, she'd fall back into the same loop of using alcohol as a means for escape, then eventually would have another pancreatitis incident and be hospitalized again. But unlike the prior hospital, this one wasn't as lenient. She couldn't go on walks, couldn't go to the store, any of it. Nagata Kabi was essentially surrounded by her own thoughts, along with the noises from other patients like herself. Not to mention that, again, she had an IV drip attached to her 24/7, which restricted her movement, making it so that she was borderline stuck in place all the time.
That's a little too much. Not even letting her take a walk. Where is she gonna get her vitamin D?
Not being able to eat, not being able to move freely, not being able to speak with anyone besides her mother, Nagata Kabi felt the need to run away. But what's important here is that she didn't immediately run away this time. She tried. She really did. But in the end, what mattered more to her was her freedom, her mental health. So once again, she ran away. The act of running away in the context of this manga becomes a much bigger symbol. It represents Nagata Kabi's problem in its full entirety. The roots of this problem, the alcohol addiction, stemmed from a desire to run away from everything. The fact that we still see running so often in this manga is a reminder that the issue plaguing Nagata Kabi's life hasn't been triumphed over. It is still holding her hostage.
And what's worse is that even if you, as a reader, want her to change, or even in real life, even if you know someone who you wish would change and, you know, become stronger or become more initiative or whatever it is, the thing is, no matter how much you advise them, they have to want to change in order to change. You can't force someone to change. It doesn't work that way, and it'll never happen. And even when people, for example, complain about their lives and complain about how much they're a victim of their own situation and they can't get out, and they keep talking bad about stuff, or even about woe is me or whatever they like to do. And this is just an example. Doesn't mean you guys do it, but as an example, you might have someone who is like that you talk to a lot if you know someone, or even in the past, maybe you knew someone that was like that. And even if you give them advice, they don't listen to it. Instead, they would rather just complain and complain over and over every day until it's to the point where you don't want to listen anymore. I feel like it's a similar thing here, where instead of her facing her issues, she'd rather run away and protect her fragile heart. And for her, that's the only way that she can cope, just like how it is for that person who I mentioned in the previous example, where for them, their way of coping is complaining to their friends about everything. And for those types of people, it's really difficult for them to change, even if they're dealing with like a life-threatening condition or anything like that. Once they have the initiative, though, that's when things truly turn for the better. I mean, obviously, it's not going to be like a fast change, but for those that truly want to change, it will happen. And if they have people who are willing to support that, then the change happens faster and they become stronger in their own way, at least when it comes to whatever issue it is that they're experiencing.
As long as Nagata Kabi is willing to run away, she will continue falling into loops of using alcohol as a safety net. But unlike the previous times, per her father's request, she sent a note to the hospital apologizing and was permitted to be an outpatient. Except this time, Nagata Kabi hadn't fallen back on drinking, even if subconsciously, she was straying away from it. I think that the lack of emphasis on drinking in the later chapters reflects that idea perfectly.
See, this is what I mean. Like, if you have the desire to change, then it will happen eventually. And especially if you have people supporting you, it'll happen. Whether it's slow, extremely slow, or standard time, I guess, how long it takes to make that change happen. Because in the end, they will make mistakes, but change is not quick. Change is filled with lots of mistakes and failures. But at the end of it all, you don't give up, and that's why you succeed in changing.
But the highlight of this manga, which will always make me tear up no matter what, is the conversation that Nagata Kabi has with her father. Nagata's father was there for her and asked her to talk about some of the stuff that she'd gone through, believing that it'd make her feel better. And after speaking so much that she forgot the contents of her own words, her father would dispel words that would not only change the trajectory of Nagata's life, but also the direction of this entire manga. Rather than giving some lackluster advice or scrutinizing her, telling her that everything is her fault and that it's time to own up to accountability.
Nah, those things, they're not always the fault of the person. I mean, for some situations it could be, but I think everyone has a little bit of fault in whatever situation they're in, but not always. And the degree of which it is your fault or accountability is not always on yourself. But the biggest thing that one has to remember is that even if you can't change the situation, you can always change your reaction to it. And I think that's more important more than anything. But I am quite curious what the dad's gonna say, so let's see.
He instead tells his daughter, "A treasure. I think you're a real treasure." These words, although short, contain an immense amount of love. He isn't trying to make Nagata Kabi feel guilty. He isn't trying to ground her in the reality of her situation.
No,
he is telling his daughter, from the bottom of his heart, the words that she had likely forgotten, reminding her that through
this is a healthy dad, okay, you guys? I mean, obviously there are, things where you would want to talk about like the situation and find solutions. But for someone like Nagata-san, I think hearing words that she's precious and more emotionally provoking, especially when it comes to unconditional love from parents who clearly love her, it's a lot more enlightening for her compared to like, oh, do this and that. Not that I am someone who is perfect when it comes to these kinds of things, because I myself prefer actually hearing solutions and implementing them rather than hearing words like, oh, you're a treasure. But everyone has different needs. And for her, what she needs is unconditional love and being told that she's loved, whether it's I love you or you're my treasure. And for her, that's way more effective than what the hospital has been telling her, which is to not drink, to not do this and that. Because in the end, what is in pain is her heart the most. And if her heart's not healed, then her body's not going to heal. Stress is the #1 killer. So it's nice to see that she's finally getting what she needs, which is talking to her dad and also knowing that she's still precious to them.
For everything, she is loved.
Even if she feels like
she has
failure,
a
she's
that
not.
Sees her for her. Those words from her father, in tandem with her mother's attempts to curate a personalized diet to counter the pancreatitis, gave Nagata Kabi a reminder at something that maybe she'd lost, or maybe something that she had forgotten.
Yep.
It gave her a foothold that she previously believed could only be acquired.
I think this is also a good indication that people do need a support system. If you don't have a support system, then you're going to depend on things that might not actually be good for you. And yes, it's scary to try to get a support system, especially if you don't have parents who do care about you. But in the end, if you can manage to get a support system in the form of a network of people who do care deeply about you, then that's more powerful than anything else in the world.
through alcohol. It reminded her that her existence is important, that she is loved, that she doesn't have to rely on some substance to clear her mind of her guilt. And in the final chapter, Nagata Kabi wraps up everything in the best way possible. She doesn't miraculously recover because she found motivation. The
Yeah,
process
obviously.
is difficult and it's everything but clean. She still yearns for drinks at times, and even worries that she could slip back into that addiction at any given moment.
Ow.
But the most important part of the conclusion is the self-growth that Nagata Kabi experiences. She realizes that while being treated as an adult may have been the start of her addiction, the roots actually went much deeper than that, and instead was potentially a product of her fear of communication and people. The cause
Social
had been
anxiety,
something
perhaps?
internal that had been there for a long time, that emerged under the pretense of that ascension into adulthood. In order to truly get over her addiction and make sure that it never comes back, she would have to confront the deepest parts of herself. The parts of herself that fear communication, the parts of herself that fear people. The final chapter is an eye-opening moment for not only the audience, but I'd imagine even Nagata Kabi herself. There's so much here regarding her addiction that before, she hadn't even begun to formulate into words. But now she's tying it all back into the pandemic and how often she had to fulfill promises, which would inadvertently lead to even more drinking. The conclusion isn't written by someone who gave up. It was written by someone who overcame that addiction and proved that despite all the running, the relapsing, Nagata Kabi was stronger than that. That Nagata Kabi wasn't as hopeless as she thought. Though Nagata Kabi has a tendency to be quite self-deprecating towards herself, I think she's a lot stronger than she gives herself credit for. There are a lot of people in this world who, rather than taking the time to learn about themselves and make it somewhere, would rather just quit. There are a lot of people in this world who find solace in the act of accepting their addiction and choosing not to face it head on. By no means is Nagata Kabi weak. Oftentimes I think
I also agree with that. She's actually a really strong person. One, because she has tried multiple times to quit, and that shows that she does want to change. It's just that at the time she wasn't targeting what she actually needed to target, which was her fear of communication with others. And so she ended up relapsing every single time. Probably doesn't help that they have a huge drinking culture in that country, which does not help. Obviously, you can get through stuff without having to drink, but the pressure is still there. And for those who aren't living in a country that does that, it's a bit easier for us to quit easily. I say easily, but it's still a pretty huge part of culture in any country. But Japan in particular has a really strong one in every aspect in adulthood, which makes it worse. But either way, at least it's slightly easier for those of us who surround ourselves with people who don't, force and pressure people to drink. You would need a lot of self-awareness and control and inner strength to say no to drinks, especially as someone who has social anxiety. For her, it's probably even harder. And the fact that she can still escape from guilt and not have to communicate with people probably made it worse. But the thing is, in the end, she realized that she does have a support system, so she doesn't need to struggle on her own. And that probably was the best way for her to realize that she doesn't really need alcohol to feel like she's important or that she has to do things. And she's targeting what she's actually struggling with, which is communicating with people. So overall, she's a very strong person. And as I said, someone who has the intention and willpower to change will change. And this process is even faster if you have people who truly do support you. But on that note, if you are dealing with someone who is struggling and they keep complaining or they keep going back to bad habits, unfortunately, there's really nothing you can do. All you can do is show them you'll wait for them and that you do care about them. But that doesn't mean you should be like sacrificing your whole self for them. It's not like you're their parent. Unless you are, then that's a different story. So in those cases, you can only change your reaction to it, but you can't force someone to change because that's something that they themselves have to choose to do. And I think she's a really good example of this, where in the beginning, the doctors, the hospital tried to make her change her alcohol addiction habits, but she never changed. She just ran away. It was only a certain point where she started to think that she wanted to change, which is why she went to that clinic. But then it was too much because, change is hard. Change is always filled with failures. I think there's probably more failures in changing than success. Success is always the end. And eventually, when you look back on your life, you'll see that by continuing to have the willpower to change, you did eventually change. Maybe you sometimes have some days of weakness, but it doesn't mean that you're a failure. It's just a reminder that you're only human and that you still can continue to change. I think that's something that a lot of people are hard on themselves about when they fail once and then they think that they're a complete failure. When in reality, there's a lot of things that would not have happened and a lot of things that wouldn't be discovered if there were no failures. By having more failures, you grow. And from that growth, you have a success. But that success isn't the end point, it's just the beginning of something, of more failures and then another success. I feel like the culture and things that we're taught as a child, we tend to think that failure is the worst thing in the world and that you never want to ever fail. But if you never fail, then how are you ever going to learn? If you never fail, then is life going to be exciting? Is it going to be fun? Are you actually going to be a better person? That's something that I question sometimes. That failure shouldn't be seen as something to be afraid of. It should be something that should be accepted as a part of life and as a part of growing and success. But a lot of times at school, if you fail, then it's like the end of the world almost to a student, which is such a horrible, horrible thing to push for, in my opinion. But it's not like I could change education, and even at work, it's like if you fail, then you're kicked out of your job and it's the end of the income there. So in the end, it's tough, but we would always need to think that failure is actually not that bad of a thing whenever we can. But it's a easy thing to say, but not an easy thing to do. And again, no one can change just because you tell them to change. You can only change if you want it.
That I am too hard on myself. I fail once at something, and in the moment, I believe that's the end of the road, no matter what it is. A video underperformed, that's the end of Wadasha. Everyone hates me now. This video didn't get X amount of likes, I'm falling off. When in reality, that just isn't the case. Nagata Kabi proved that right here. Failing is okay. You can fail once, you can fail twice, or you can fail over and over. But eventually, as long as you put forth at least an ounce of effort, you will make it somewhere.
Exactly.
I have not reached that point yet. I think that as I'm writing this, I'm still failing. I still haven't found my true foothold, but have I given up? Absolutely not. And I think that's what matters when talking about things like this. Each day I will still continue to try, even harder than the last. And I think that in time, I will not only learn to be a little more lenient with myself, but I will also find my foothold and grow in ways that I can't even begin to formulate. That is my hope and my pride for the future. Thank you all so much for watching. I know that this video was a little bit different, and that's because when I was writing this, rather than revising to oblivion, I kind of let my feelings just run wild. Everything you see here is how I really feel without the filters from the revisions and this and that and that. If you guys haven't already, please be sure to subscribe, especially if you want to see more from me, more videos like this. It would really mean the world. I also have a Ko-fi and a Discord in the description if you guys want to join those or support me. And with all that said, everyone, take care.
Yes. So what he said about not giving up is a huge thing. The moment you give up is the moment you truly do fail. But does giving up have to be permanent? No. It's always temporary. If you want to, you can always choose to try again. And I think that's something very important to remember, that nothing is permanent except maybe death. Actually, probably death is very permanent. I mean, maybe there's other things that are permanent too. Let me know down below what you think is also permanent. But overall, this manga has a lot of lessons, and I think it's quite amazing how the mangaka is putting herself out there by writing about the lessons she learned and the things that she went through. It's not something that most people would be comfortable sharing to the world, but in the end, she chose to do so. And I think that was the correct choice, because the way that she draws is very easy to look at. But not only that, the things that she talks about is very relatable on a personal level. Whether you drink or not, it doesn't matter, because the overall pressure of adulthood is something that we've all gotten to deal with or still are dealing with. And so you have a hard time being lenient. But there's always something to remember, especially for those who have low self esteem. If you treat others really well, then you should be treating yourself the same way. And I think that's something that most people need to remember, is that you are also another person. And if you treat those around you much better than you treat yourself, then that's really sad, isn't it? When you yourself are another person who's precious. I think that's one thing that I was thinking about as he ended the video, or as this content creator ended the video. I don't want to accidentally use a pronoun that they might not accept or use. I'm sorry. I would have to double check that. But either way, that was one thing that I was thinking of, where he or she or they, I don't know which pronoun, I assume, but they, I assume he, but I got it wrong last time, so I'm worried that I'm gonna make another mistake. But they said that they didn't want to, or they want to be lenient to themselves one day. And with the pressure of adulthood, we tend to think of adults as perfect beings when we're kids, for the most part, especially as we're born and starting to think and be able to say things. But in reality, people are still people. Whether you're grown up or not, doesn't matter. Everyone's flawed and everyone has issues. And because of that, if you treat others really well because of low self esteem, then shouldn't you treat yourself the same too, since you are another person? Of course, even if I say that, that's easier said than done, since most people tend to be harsher on themselves than others. But if you treat your friends or those precious to you the same way you treat yourself, then does that make you feel better? That's always something to think about. But that's a different topic on its own. So either way, I really enjoyed this video. It was very vulnerable, and I think we talked a lot about life lessons that perhaps some of you may not have experienced, or that you did thoroughly learn, or those of you who are aware of it but are in the process of change. I'm not really sure where I'm at. Personally, I think I'm slowly reaching the end of the change funnel for myself, but there are times when I have days when I'm feeling weak, and I end up going through phases where I want to escape, and I just indulge myself in like a whole bunch of things. Not alcohol or anything like that, but maybe like watching a ton of anime or reading a ton of webtoons, even if that is my hobby too, but too much is too much, right? So I end up pushing everyone out and being a lot more isolated compared to normal. And so usually I would need someone to snap me out of it, to remind me that I need to focus on reality here. When your head is too much in the clouds, it can be difficult to figure out what is a good amount of time to be present and when is it okay to just turn your brain off. In any case, if you enjoyed watching this video, then be sure to support the original. And If you enjoyed my reaction to it, then be sure to give it a like, comment below, subscribe, and share. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!